Our weekend debate, looking at different constituencies. In this section, we're talking about Douglas Central. So 4 people, 2 seats, of course, as everywhere. Damien Chappelli, Anne Corlett, Sarah Hackman, and Chris Thomas. Starting with Damien, certainly he's getting a lot of posters around the place. I don't know about everywhere else in the Isle of Man, because I've only seen Douglas, but he's gone for posters big time.
I have to say that with regard to Damien, who I'll be blunt, I would like to see get in. I think he would make a very significant contribution. I think there's a guy who cares about fairness and justice, and I think that narrative needs to emerge more strongly in the coming years. But where I was surprised was the lady called Sarah. Mm-hmm. She gave her reason with you, I think, for standing, was that she wanted an election to actually take place. But I think Damien had already declared some significant time beforehand. So I'm confused. On that one. Very, very puzzling.
I mean, he's a lawyer, right? So is that a good quality to have in...
Well, all I can say is look at the contribution Jane Poole Wilson has made in terms of her experience in the House, and having a couple, I think, would be very helpful, particularly with Damien's background on his understanding of the Law Society et al. I think he would be a real gain for the constituency.
Didn't look like there was going to be any contest at all. But back to your thing, at one stage it was remarkable, isn't it? Only 4 people standing in a seat. I mean, that's a 50-50 chance almost, isn't it? How did it go in the hustings?
This wasn't one I went to. Noah went to it. I have watched bits of it. It was not the most engaging, perhaps, of meetings that I've seen.
But being he's a lawyer, I'm guessing he was pretty good if you know, talking and communicating.
Quite boisterous, yeah.
Okay, I'll park that because next is Anne Corlett, who notoriously doesn't like doing interviews. I got her in front of my cameras eventually, but she's never liked doing these sort of things. She's a very quiet person, and you've worked with her, obviously.
And is a lovely person. But I've said this to Anne, so I'll say it here, and that is that being an MHK isn't a quiet and gentle process. You have to put yourself out there. And stand up for what you believe.
And as I said already, many people, not many, a few anyway, didn't even want to do interviews. Standing people to be an MHK
I don't understand
didn't want to do interviews at all.
Your duty is to put yourself out there and give people a chance to assess you.
What's your take?
Well, I mean, I don't think Mrs. Scott ever has responded to our questionnaire. She didn't respond to the paper's questionnaire either. Oh, right. So you've won in the media sense this term if you got Mrs. Scott in front of a camera. Yeah. It's a weird one to me because I sort of didn't have a lot of dealings with Miss Scott until recently regarding an issue about Ballacameen that we raised in terms of the overcrowding at the school. And then I started talking to people in the area and parents at the school, and they all started saying the same thing. Ridiculously good constituency, MHK. Does tremendous work for us. We want to see a reduction in speed limits. We got it.
Yeah, I'm hearing that. Likeability factor's high.
It's one of these. I think that almost to contradict what you said, she has crafted a weird niche of being a very quiet politician who gets along with the job, but people in her area have noticed it. So
and she said she wouldn't mind being
it's good to have
minister.
Two opposing views.
But, you know, she saw herself potentially being a minister or something at some point, which is interesting because when she answered questions on health and in the things, it wasn't. Well, she said it wasn't good, and I think that's being generous. But I suppose you learn your craft, don't you, to try and do better answers and do what you have to do.
Far worse displays from ministers over the past 5 years, let's face it.
Name names. No. Don't.
Watch your videos, you sat there often enough.
I know. Sarah Hackman, back to, because you mentioned that she's...
I don't understand why she's
standing.
I'm confused by that.
I only know from what I've seen in the videos, I thought she spoke reasonably well, fairly. Yeah, she served on the local council, I believe, at one point. And I think that's a good start for anyone wanting to be an MHK in Douglas Council because it becomes an exercise in blaming the DOI for everything. So, I don't know. I think, I don't know who wins in this constituency. I don't know enough about the constituency, if I'm honest. And I think, but from what I've seen of her, she's as good a candidate as many.
Well, Chris Thomas, who's got many signs, he put pictures up. He had them all in his back garden, wherever, ready to go out again. He's an interesting character.
Gets back in again. I mean,
that's why.
Because the good and the bad side. The good side is his grasp of issues is very, very significant. his weakest side is that sometimes he wants to say too many things all at once. And I'm only saying now in public what I've said to Chris in private, which is just focus on less of the issues you know a lot about and drive those forward rather than, as it were, being erudite in a complex sense and lose people.
Do you think that's perhaps why, as Policy and Reform Minister, he had gas, BBC and the rates reform, 3 really big areas which are going to affect people for a long time? Do you think that's why perhaps we didn't necessarily get to an end conclusion for them, because they were 3 big areas that instead of focusing on one, he tried to take all 3 at a time?
Yeah, I think that that Chris might very well in the future do better with a more focused remit than the generality of policy reform, which is an area I've experienced.
Did he do the right thing by coming out of government? Do you think that's helped his cause to stand next time? And there's been talk of him being the chief minister as the white knight that comes through if we get a blockage in there. Was that a good thing for him?
I would vote for Alf as chief minister if I was there.
I'm talking about that. If you get 2 locks, then the third person comes through almost, the white knight scenario, isn't it? But anyway, do you think it did it right to come out of government when he did? When he was sacked, basically, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, he was, but I think at the time that he was dismissed, he was very aware of the fact that would happen by the action he took. Yeah. And that's something I wouldn't sit in judgment over that issue. I think that's a matter for him to speak to you about.
Yeah, but you were in government. You voluntarily stepped down, didn't you? I mean, that's different.
Well, I resigned.
Yeah, voluntarily. That's what I said.
Yeah.
But you still came out of it. So just trying to see if you any tips that you would recommend that people do get out when they can to help them get back in again.
Well, ideally, you shouldn't have to resign. Chris did. I did. Chris ultimately put himself in a position where he was removed.
He sort of resigned because he knew what he was going to do would make him be
probably
pushed.
Right. I think that's the truth.
Right, okay. Let's see what happens. That's the end of this section.